Buongiorno, Valerie.
Good morning. How are you?
Yes, you look sharp at least.
Well, if I turn the camera, I was fiddling with it after that. It's very funny. If the camera's got anything on the background that it thinks might be important, then it tries to focus on it. So if I open that door, you can see down further away. That's okay. But if it's got something,
yes.
If it's got something else in here that it tries to focus on, like the bookcase, then it gets in a muddle. So
interesting. It's too intelligent.
something
to think about for future artificial intelligence.
Yeah, well, it's obviously trying to sort of focus on the point.
It focuses on whatever moves or is interesting, and then it presumably also has an algorithm for this background because it's supposed to be able to fit any background behind you, and then it must isolate whatever is you, which is kind of in the foreground and moving. So
yeah, maybe
it's somewhere there.
I didn't realize I had such a morning.
Right.
Francesca, buongiorno.
Hello, everyone.
Right.
Ooh. Oh.
Hey, Peter.
Now we've got another clean doc. We've got two versions of it. Oh no, sorry, it's part two.
It's part one and part two.
Yeah, I'm just not awake. Yeah, I had a quick look at part one, but I haven't looked at part two.
Yeah, I literally just put that up now.
Lisa, good morning.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
I'm kind of forgetting that it's kind of morning in UK. Well, I'm planning for lunch now. Today is something very Italian, pasta with chickpeas.
Nice.
I guess the Italians will kind of recognize this, very home-like food. Pasta e ceci. Already starting to think about it.
I'm feeling guilty now from keeping you from it.
No, it's okay. It's only 11:05 even in Italy, so until 12 I can stand this expectation.
Despite so many years here, I'm still kind of struggling when somebody says, "Oh, I'm free in the afternoon," and I say, "Okay, what do you mean 3?" It's like, no, I mean I'm free from 12:30 to 2:30. I'm like, that's like,
yes, we have slightly different feelings about time.
Yeah. And I'm also available in the evening. You mean like 9 p.m.? No, it's after 5. That's just mid-afternoon.
No, but I think very common things. I don't know about Britain, but if you said to somebody, "Come over for dinner," when do you expect that person? At 6 o'clock?
7:38, something.
That late. So that coincides with Italy, at least central Italy, because then people would turn up around 8.
Yeah, 8's a bit late actually, but 7:30
Yes.
would be normal.
It's a bit of a class thing. People who worked hard needed their food when they stopped working, so we'd eat
So it proves I
at
don't work.
6.
They would have dinner earlier, yeah.
Well, they'd have it at lunchtime, in the middle of the day. You know, that was
Richer people would have eaten in what was first of all the middle of the day and then gradually got later and later because it was a mark of status to have it later. And then eventually went more for an evening meal instead. I'm not quite sure how that worked.
Well, I live next to a farm, and I know that the farmer goes home at lunchtime every day for a big meal, not just bread and cheese. You know that they seem to.
Perhaps he or she has been up from 6 o'clock in the morning or something.
Sorry, just checking.
Ciao, Jasmina.
Am I in the right meeting?
We started talking about.
Well, you're certainly welcome. I don't know if you intended to meet us. This is the chapter Challenge 06 meeting about modeling.
Yes, no, I was just checking because there's a food issue discussion, and I can give you a lot about it because I don't like how in England we have dinner very late. Dinner should be really at 3 or 4 o'clock, which is how I would like to eat it. But maybe that's not the subject now.
Well, I don't know. Does anybody want to talk about serious things, or shall we go on with recipes? Because I wonder what Jasmina's favorite recipes are. I mean, I was illustrating pasta with chickpeas, so maybe
I survive generally on meat and chocolate and salad.
meat, chocolate, and salad. I wonder what that's called together. But sounds nice. Okay,
Try to
anybody
avoid
for serious
carbs.
things?
For those who don't know me, I try to avoid carbs, and so pasta is not in my books.
Okay, you could be a northern Italian then eating risotto instead all the time. You can do with
No,
risotto
but rice is
almost
also
what you do
carbs.
with pasta. No risotto.
No, but tiramisu I could eat.
What about polenta then, made out of?
A polenta, yes, I do.
Polenta is okay. Okay, that's we can find a common ground then. Especially polenta with sausages or polenta with venison or something like that. Yes,
And
shall we
lovely
say-
watermelons.
I'm getting hungry now.
Right, we're all going to stop for lunch soon.
Are these talks still recorded? Because if somebody jumps in and listens to them, they'll be wondering how we get any work done.
Right.
No, but this is just called warm up to serious research. Nothing to be ashamed of.
Well, you know what? When this is all over, we have to all go for dinner. That's what the outcome of this should be.
Well, I have counted. We are at least in depth with, I don't know how much, 50 beers at the pub in Cambridge or something like that from this whole stuff.
And then we can start traveling to each other's places and then have dinners there or organize summer schools. This is what I loved when I was doing my PhD. We had summer schools in different places across the world. They were just very nice, like Corsica, like Sicily, etc.
No,
plenty of backlog from this.
This dinner
COVID
sounds
period.
this dinner sounds like a disaster. Jasmina will be alone at 3, dinner, followed by someone else at
I
4.
think we could-
Arrives around 5, 6, and then some people arrive at 8.
The other option
we could
is,
have a lot of fun
Lorenzo,
with Zoom
we'll
dinners.
just-
With,
the
with
other option
Zoom,
is that we'll just start eating at 3 and then we continue eating all the way to 7, 8, and that's it. We write a few papers in the process.
I think we could agree on some kind of buffet that will last for several hours. So.
I was going to say
Okay.
that's the advantage to being on Zoom that we can, if we have a Zoom dinner, we can each eat whatever we want to eat. You can, and then if we have a second Zoom dinner, we can swap the recipes in advance and randomize them, and everyone will. And I will be making myself pasta with chickpeas and so on. And
Yes. We have, as soon as we have finished our paper, we can start doing these things. So we take that as a carrot or something.
We could make a recipe book, well, I say mathematicians, but it's interdisciplinary recipe book.
There is already a famous one called numerical recipes, but it's not really about that.
But are you really sure that you want to exchange recipes with a Dutchman?
Oh yes, some of them.
I don't get the context. What's the context, Peter?
Well, Dennis proposed to. Well, Dennis is from Scotland. That's probably not the best either, but I think still the Dutch are worse.
A good route.
Sorry?
Now Glenn will jump in, and then Ben, and there will be all sorts of issues.
No, I didn't catch that actually, but
No, but I remember my first visit to the Netherlands. I went into a place where they sold food and asked, what's typically Dutch? And then the person started saying, well, we have nasi goreng, satay, and after some Indonesian dishes, then he said, and of course, we also have French fries with mayonnaise. And that was it. That was
Oh
the
yeah,
description.
mayonnaise is another staple in my diet, which I've been told of a lot of times for.
Okay, but if we get too hungry, we will probably not concentrate on today's subject matter. So shall we switch
Yeah, I think that's a good
to
idea.
getting this paper over with so we can go on with the recipe exchange? How's it going then? We now have a kind of latest version.
Yeah, I think we've got a latest version in 2 parts, which is about, in total is about, if my maths is correct, is about 7,000 words, just over. So it's not too bad lengthwise.
Good.
Mhm. And it has now been revised in every part except for discussion.
Yeah, the discussion still needs to be written. Actually, we haven't got a discussion. So
I'll briefly start. I sent an email, with you might have seen, but thank you for the household model rewriting. I know that Peter's message sounded like you were wondering what I think of the cutting. It looks great. Thank you. I did when I wrote the first draft, I just put in everything that just sprang to mind, but especially in terms of space, some things could go, and I'm very happy with what came out.
Okay.
And I started reading it, and I had some comments which I noted down, but I need to write them somewhere. Which draft should I focus on if I want to make edits?
so there's the 25th of March version, which says part 1 and part 2 clean, I guess.
Yeah. You're happy for me to put comments there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You might want to just save it with your initials so it doesn't get.
Yeah. They are all minor, just a couple of things. I noticed sentences like HIV, then we introduced the concept of core risk group and network modeling. And I'm like, I don't think graph theory stemmed out of HIV, so we probably need to qualify them.
Yes, and in fact, the idea of core group is such was initiated by Heathcote when he studied gonorrhea, I think, in one of his previous work, or something like that. He kind of had the idea of core group, Heathcote. But even if it was not initiated, it was maybe made use of more extensively or something like that.
I wasn't worried about the core group. The core group made sense, but I don't think
the network modeling.
It's a bit excessive to attribute graph theory to modeling HIV.
Yeah.
No, probably we can say something like we're a lot used in disease modeling or something like that, because of course the single ideas might have been preceding.
Well, it's just an example of.
These comments are welcome. We don't want to.
Yeah.
And I think the first graph theory and epidemic combination is actually in the Broadbent and Hammersley paper on percolation. That's the first I know of.
Mm-hmm.
There was some
Where
reference.
it's about the spread.
There's some reference to graphs and networks in something in the 1940s. I mean, I think there are various bits have come together, and there was certainly I mean, I think it's. I think network modeling has been looked at in rather different sort of ways before, perhaps settling down to. Well, I think it probably is still, even today, it's probably looked at by different groups in different ways. So best to avoid saying that any one person invented it at a particular moment, I think. Glenn, do you want to take us through in order, maybe, to...
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but just to finish with network theory, usually it is ascribed to Euler about the Königsberg bridges
Yeah, true.
as
Yeah.
the first result in network theory. But that's, yes, before HIV, presumably.
So I'll just share my screen just so that we're all literally on the same page. So, I mean, I read through part one. I thought, generally speaking, it's looking pretty good. There's obviously a few things to tidy up still, and the main thing is, I think probably we probably do need to get rid of these bullets because I don't think they serve that much of a purpose. I would agree with that.
No, I just left those there because I hadn't done anything. I got rid of some of them because they were already mentioned in 6.0, but those weren't. So I just left them in case anybody wanted to incorporate them or remind them something for the later sections, but probably they just go.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was that I started writing what was in the rest of the paper. But I didn't know what was in the rest of the paper, so I stopped after 6.1.
Yeah, so some sort of overview is needed. Yeah. Yeah, I think 6.1 reads nicely. I too liked the slightly shorter version of the household models.
Yeah.
I think that was, yeah, so stop there. Yeah, that's about it. So, no, down a bit. Yeah, so you've got a comment, do we need to link to household models? I think the answer's, you could either put something at the end of this or before it. Maybe at the beginning, I don't know, depends how it works in terms of connecting best, but at the end of the household models, I don't think in the bit about household models, it says anything about much about the structure of how households relate to each other. So some remark about how household models can be extended to incorporate spatial network structure. Maybe before this?
I would say that kind of sends you directly to agent-based modeling, those that do a almost city map of things. There you would have households which are spatially located with schools and workplaces. But that's agent-based stuff usually.
Well, that's an extreme, Gianpaolo. I mean, alternatively, let's say you could have some kind of simple but very strongly spatial model like a lattice, and then instead of having individuals at nodes, you could have households at nodes.
That would be interesting for kind of qualitative insight in these things. But what I meant is that those that have done such things are mostly, I think, the agent-based Americans who have modeled the city of, what was it, San Diego or something else.
Yeah.
I don't remember what city they modeled for some purpose.
Wasn't it
Almost
Portland?
map-like.
Portland,
You're right. The
But in a
Portland
way,
model.
you're using agent-based models a little bit as an insult here, implying that there's nothing sort of analytic that can be done with them. But I think either way, whether you refer to them favorably or unfavorably, I think the answer to Glenn's point is to say that, that obviously there will be various ways in which you can combine households with some kind of spatial network structure between the households. But then you could say something about how perhaps there's not very much done about this other than in a sort of agent-based modeling framework.
No, but in fact, this kind of development is kind of mentioned now in the household section as one which would be desirable.
Where was that?
Well, if Glenn goes up somewhere, I remember that there is a thing about
It does talk about
here, the last sentence, which is kind of short. The whole household thing is kind of short.
Yeah,
So
I think one of the problems is that some of the comments that are still there precede the rewriting it. So,
Yeah.
you know, that they've sort of been overtaken a bit. Or
so one way to cope with this point, sorry, would be just to, in that sentence, you could just add the given basic network or spatial structure. You could add.
Yes.
I think if you added that, that would make it a bit more of a lead in to the
Yes.
to the next paragraph. How about that?
great.
No, yes, great. To be estimated from data between
Well, I think
households. That's fine.
I think that almost deals with Glenn's
yeah.
point in 2 words. So,
Very good.
Happy to delete that.
we could move on. But I had a much more substantive point, which I'm not quite sure. Perhaps I should mention it just now, which is when we come on to the intervention section, rather further down. It sort of starts talking about what kind of models you might have for dealing with interventions, and it doesn't really refer back to all this stuff where we've gone through all the different kinds of models, which seemed a bit strange to me. And
Yeah, I think originally it was at the start, I think. Maybe. Yeah.
And possibly by referring back to what we've already been through, it might be possible to shorten it as well as making the paper better connected.
Yeah.
But I think that probably should happen in the interventions section. I mean, you know, an alternative approach would be to deal with interventions as you go along with the models in the earlier bit. But I think that's perhaps trying to do too many things at once.
Yeah.
It occurred to me that we have no graphs or pictures in this thing.
No.
And what Dennis said was that we could make a small picture of how the different sections are connected in a graph. That would be very self-referential in the computer guy style, you know, that refer to themselves.
And we could do this both. We could do this both with a spatial diagram and a network diagram.
Yes, of course. Projection of the paper on the plane. No, but seriously, we don't have any illustrations. Do we have anything that could serve as one picture somewhere?
Yeah, we could think about that. I think early on I did sketch some ideas, but then the paper structures shifted quite a lot.
So, sorry, just to ask, so are we saying that the intervention part would need to split into interventions across different frameworks, or using different frameworks to explore interventions?
No, I don't think. Oh, I mean, can we come to that in a minute? 'Cause
oh yeah, okay.
I've got some other comments about that. So, yeah. So then we have this within and between host pathogen dynamics. I'm still not 100% sure that this goes in this section on contact structures, but I'm happy to be persuaded otherwise. But it did strike me it was slightly different, or that we maybe need to make more.
No, but I kind of agree. I mean, there should be something about models of the disease itself, and then models of the people who carry the disease, and then maybe models for what we do with society or the society. So you have 3 levels, right? The level of the bugs, the people, and society. And in these 3 levels, this thing fits in the bugs. And then our models with households fits at the individual level, and the interventions fit at the societal level. I don't know, one could have such a view. And, th-
I
and
mean-
then there would need to be a separate thing for the within bugs models.
So the one thing I was thinking is that when you bridge within host and between host modeling, you're really, you can, the within host modeling that gives you, the easiest way to think about it is that within modeling can give you an infectivity profile, which you then use to understand how this changes in diverse hosts and how this changes within the interaction of the hosts. But that is really reliant on data. So you can't really do much with infectivity or viral profiles if you don't have a viral sequencing data. So maybe this fits better in the data because the challenge is around having the data to quantify parameters for within host modeling. Because if you just characterize and explore the disease without data, it's hypothetical.
Originally, this was in the section 6.2, and I'm just wondering what the thinking was behind moving it. That's my question, really.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the logic was, but I mean, you could think of modeling, and I mean, people have done modeling the infectivity profile, not based on data, but purely as a sort of.
Yeah. Although
Yes.
But that's a little bit old school because.
Well, yes, maybe, but it sort of fits with the. I mean, what the earlier sections here are sort of models in the absence of data very much.
If you think about Fraser's rather influential paper, he just hypothesizes how much of the profile is before symptoms, which is almost a qualitative thing. I mean, he doesn't, well, then he puts in 2-3 examples, but there's not much data there.
So this section did have a paragraph that's now moved to the introduction, which is about the Wallinger and Lipschitz.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
So that now appears twice, I think, because it appears in the introduction, but also appears, a reference to that appears further down.
Yeah, although it's just,
I don't know that matters, but it does.
It's mentioned further down, but it's quite brief.
But then somewhere within the topic, within host dynamics, you should have the birth of variants. Where is that covered? The fact that we have competition between virus strains and the new variants. And
it's covered in 6.2 at the moment.
6.2. So we kind of separate two different within host dynamics. One is how the person kind of sees these dynamics within himself, and another one is how the bugs see the dynamics between themselves. Okay. But it's true. I mean, it's not clear. It doesn't have very much to do with contact if we don't rephrase this thing as what drives infectivity or something like that. Because then it would have to do with contact. And then we could say that is driven by infectivity profiles and internal dynamics and whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we just need to add that rationale.
Or change the title a little bit.
The thing is also
infectivity and disease duration or something like that. That would be the title. Then maybe we can almost leave the thing and change inside just to connect it better with contacts. Say something that has to do
so this isn't all about infectivity profile either, because there's a section.
Or maybe how effective are contacts in spreading the infection? Because
that's not here. Because there is so they are almost, there is a correlation, but they are independent in a sense events, because you can have a contact with an infected person, and if they are infected with a low viral load, you will not get infected, or you may not get infected. Your probability per contact transmission is lower. Whereas you could, for example, have a shorter contact with somebody with a high viral load and a different shape infectivity profile, and you can get infected. So there is a correlation, but it's not, it's sort of, it can be thought of two independent events. So this is more about one step and the next step. So that's why it's within host and between host.
Could we retitle it as something to do with the effectiveness of contact? So the earlier section was about the process of contact.
We could, maybe we could call it,
this one would be more about effectiveness.
but we could maybe call it multi-scale dynamics, because it is really kind of different scales.
No, but without calling it multi-scales, if the first sentence says that much of the effectiveness in spreading a disease of contacts is due to parameters usually described as infectivity and duration, etc. The drivers of these things are essentially have. So I guess so that just to tie it in with contacts, we should change the title to something which kind of says, what is this thing about? Since we don't deal with variance here, which is another within host dynamic, because that's where variants are created, the mutations occur there.
We do have a section on that. So
Yes.
maybe
So that's already covered somewhere else, right? And it's
but this, what we're really talking about here is how we order stuff, I think, or largely, and maybe we need a section on how the internal processes
affect the efficacy or the effectiveness of contacts.
Yeah.
No, I like Valerie's effectiveness. I guess that I've never been quite sure about the difference between effectiveness and efficacy and such things, but maybe effectiveness.
Efficacy tends to have specific definitions, doesn't it? Whereas effectiveness is just a sort of an ordinary everyday word in English with, without any specific definition, I think.
The problem I have with whenever we talk about effectiveness, or often it's called like probability of transmission across a contact or something like this. But the problem I have with that is that you need a definition of a contact. And if we want to
that's one of the problems which can be mentioned. But that would refer to the data chapter, because that sounds like polymorph, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a directly transmissible infection, it's one thing. But if the next pandemic is a vector-borne or a sexually transmitted infection, then the concept of contact changes. So most of the time, mathematicians in their models just sweep the problem under the carpet, and they just define a rate of making infectious contacts, which is already the product of contacts times the effectiveness. So, yeah, the problem is that knowing what happens within the host, for example, the viral load, is generally somewhat positively correlated with a probability of transmission across a contact, but there is always like a big discussion whether it's linearly related, it's logarithmically related, and whether a virus that is better replicated within the host might not be better at surviving the between host step and so on. So it's just it's always a bit complicated.
No, but you're perfectly right. But I think that somewhere in the beginning, we say that we mainly think of person-to-person transmission, because otherwise to mix in vectors and cholera and things like that would make everything very general. What if you infect through a water reservoir? I mean, that's... So I think we say somewhere in the beginning that we are mainly concerned with person-to-person transmission or something like that, right? Because that's what we think about most of the time here. Valerie, do we say person-to-person transmission?
I don't remember. I was just wondering whether to come out of a full screen and have a quick look. Because somehow, although I keep trying, I can't scroll up and down on this at the moment.
Yes, that's difficult. But
I don't think we explicitly say person to person, but
Directly transmissible, maybe we say directly transmissible. If I remember something directly. But maybe then, Glenn, we can leave this, and if you just insert a kind of note here that maybe change title towards contact related, then maybe the content could stay here if it's mostly about infectivity and transmissibility and correlations. On the other hand, as soon as we start talking about the problem that Lorenzo mentions, then we get into the data chapter, because everything we do practically is based on contact studies, and then we have a multiplier, and then it becomes infection matrix. So we have the statistical problem of inferring infectivity from contacts.
I can't see anything about talking about human to human transmission, although maybe it's there, but we ought to put something in the beginning of 6.1, I suppose, that says, you know, for the sake of definiteness, we'll concentrate on those sorts of
Yes, we will be mainly discussing directly transmitted diseases.
Yeah.
Or
Second thing, I think I had proposed to move the within and between between host dynamics in 6.1, but my main concern was that I thought it was a problem that comes before other problems like vaccination and contact tracing. So I was not present at the later discussion, but I'm fine moving back to 6.2. I just felt that it comes before, for example, contact tracing. That was my only comment.
yeah.
no, but I kind of feel that if the chapter is kind of slightly tweaked to be about these internal things, infectivity, transmissibility, duration, etc., it is good to have it with contacts, because it's the link that makes a contact into infection in some sense. But then we should just tweak it a little bit to have that direction. And then it would fit here. While, for instance, multi-strain things and mutations could fit in 6.2, because that's very close to how do we intervene against these new variants and whatever, and it's very actual as well. Everybody's talking about variants right now. It's very confusing. There are about, 10 interesting variants right now around the world. They have even been given a new name. Yesterday I listened to a BMJ seminar, and they are now called VOCs, VOCs,
Yeah.
which is variants of concern. Somebody is concerned about them.
Okay, so yeah, I'll revisit this. I mean, some of it might need to stay here and some of it might need to go, or because some of it definitely is not relevant to the conversation about contacts, really. I don't think.
Okay, how long is it? Maybe you can kind of give this. Does it end there? Lithgow, Pellis, and Fraser?
Yeah, that's
Yes. Shall who volunteers? Valerie and I? Could we maybe try to tweak it
Sure.
towards contacts?
Yeah.
What does Valerie say? I mean,
Yeah, I'm
are you
happy to try. I'm
interested?
not-
I mean, actually, maybe it
Do
is.
you like tweaking?
Oh, I can never resist a good tweak, but I'm not quite sure what we've decided in terms of, I mean, there's a logical progression, isn't there, from just the process of contact to the chance that infection is transmitted during a contact, which depends both. I mean, there's dividing the state within the individual further, which we talk about somewhere, but there's also linking infectivity to that, which perhaps we don't talk so much about.
I think, well, I think it does mention it. Well, maybe it doesn't do it very explicitly, but I think this last paragraph is about that, really.
Yeah, it is, but perhaps we just need to sort of clarify, you know, the odd extra sentence might make the logical progression through these things a little bit clearer. Also,
this section about disease states rather than a sort of continuous viral load, I think does actually relate to that, because one of the points I was trying to make here, which may be unsuccessfully, but is that, you know, when we talk about susceptible, infected, recovered, that's relatively straightforward in terms of what we mean. But as soon as you start introducing other states like exposed or different levels of infectivity and so on, it becomes, you know, that then does start to relate to contacts, doesn't it? Because, you know, how infectious is an asymptomatic state versus a symptomatic? You know, how is an exposed state slightly infectious but not very? Or
maybe we
there are
just
lots
need
of subtle questions that come in when you try and fit these models to data, because how you interpret what the tests are telling you is sort of defining what the states mean.
But maybe we just need a third section, in the sense that you have the contacts, and then what Valerie says, the infectivity, and then you have the interventions. So maybe we just need a 6.2 in a way that contains this and not much more, and then 6.3, and then discussion.
Yeah. So we could have a section which contains this, and then the stuff about
and the contact
variants.
tracing.
Sorry.
And the contact tracing, presumably.
Yeah,
Are you
maybe. Yeah.
suggesting that we put?
We
I
could
think we've
could
moved
just
these around quite a few times.
I know.
Put this back closer to the contact tracing again, or bring the contact tracing up after this. Perhaps it is anyway now. I lose track of the order.
Yeah. So
No, but it's okay. I mean, it has to do with modeling the infection between individuals. That's the contact stuff. Modeling the infection within the individual. That's about here or something like that. Modeling the infection in society. That's about interventions. So we kind of already are more or less there, but maybe we need this within the individual. Something.
yeah. Should we go all the way through, and then we can maybe come back to where things should go?
Yes, this section is then.
So then the next part of the contact one is modeling the impact of interventions. I originally called this modeling human behavior, and I still think that's slightly more accurate, but I'm happy to go with interventions. But I would make the point that it's not just about interventions, because people might respond to things.
I agree. Interventions and behavior, interventions and behavior, presumably, or behavior and interventions and behavior. Behavior is usually a response to interventions, or even in the more general sense that you just write in the newspaper that there's a bad disease around, then people start changing behavior.
Yeah.
That's an intervention as such. So interventions and behavior sounds.
Or changing behavior. Impact of interventions and changing behavior, because that sort of implies that the behavior changes could occur even without the interventions,
Yeah,
which they could, as Jampi was saying.
But there could also be interventions and people don't change behavior. That's what, okay.
yeah, or they don't change as much as we hope or something.
But I agree, changing behavior implies that it may change by itself or because of interventions. Okay.
People have comments. I think Dennis was saying he thought this section needs to refer back to.
It was just, I think it's just, I felt that the bit about where it gets onto models and branching processes and various things a little bit further down, you feel that have these things already been mentioned in the model bit, and if not, why not?
This one here.
Yeah, there are many choices for model structures in addressing these issues. So, you know, the obvious question for the reader is, have you not told us about the choices we need to know about earlier?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why is it needed? It may be needed, but I think it needs to relate back. You know, it needs to say the kinds of models we've already talked about need adapting in new ways or whatever, you know.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe some of the words sort of say that. It's just the way it's, the sort of headline sort of impression seems a bit wrong.
You could almost replace it just with a sentence, couldn't you, that paragraph? That just says that, you know, the choices for model structures have been described already, basically.
Yeah, I think part of the reason for this was that I'm not sure whether they have. I mean, so as in some of them have, but some of them haven't. So we mention network models, but we don't really go into them in much detail. And we kind of had a bit of discussion last week, and also in terms of agent-based models, we don't really say much about them either. And
but
so,
we're not saying very much in this paragraph either.
No, true.
I mean, there's, you know, it's just a list basically. I mean, it might, if there's more here than there was already, then maybe we just need to amplify what there was earlier with an extra half sentence or two, and then cut this. Or simply refer back. The next paragraph starts with such approaches. So if one replaced that by some reference back to the previous
Different approach.
or the approaches described, or, you know, outlined in 6.1 above or wherever it is.
No, but the question is, do we gain anything by kind of detailing 2-3 different technical approaches to modeling? I mean, whether you have age-stratified SCIR or agent-based, all these are existing model types, so that there's no challenge in talking about them, and they are rather technical in many ways. Do we gain anything by mentioning them at all?
Yeah, I guess the only challenge is finding the right type of model for the right purpose.
Maybe this is the point that current approaches focus on the contact structure, whereas what we're talking about in this paragraph and here.
So existing modeling approaches then, or yeah, well, we have modeling that existing to modeling. Okay. However, it is likely No, Lorenz is right. If you want to express the dilemma of choosing the best technical modeling tool, then maybe after saying that existing approaches offer a valuable framework, although the problem of choosing this framework from different available one remains. Something like that. Because we don't know whether it's better to have an ABM model or an age-structured model or a simple SIR model, really, sometimes, depending on the quality of...
I think that's true, but I don't think that's what this section's about, because
I was just saying that.
Go on.
So I was just saying that what you said, this section is not about which one is better, but that they can both answer potentially different questions. So just highlighting the variety.
Well, so actually, I don't think it's about that either. So,
okay.
What I think it's about is the fact that so what we say here is that the simplest approach to modeling interventions is basically to change your contact rate. I mean, basically, that's a very long paragraph that says that, I think. And what this paragraph here is saying is that, this paragraph here is saying, okay, there's lots of ways you can do that, which Valerie, Valerie is sort of commenting, and several others have said, maybe we don't need this because we've kind of covered it above. And then this paragraph, I think, is saying that none of those approaches are necessarily appropriate because they don't actually model the processes that are driving the contact process. And I think, in my mind at least, this section is about models that start to model the processes that drive contact networks. So it's kind of behavioral modeling. And so I think what this is saying is that you can only go so far with changing the contact rate. But if you really want to understand what telling people they'll have to stay at home is going to do, then you have to understand what drives that behavior, and that obviously that's very difficult, but it's a challenge, right?
But yeah, no, I get it, but is it really true that that's the case? Because can you not capture behavior in a different way whilst you change just the contact pattern, just the C, and then you add another component?
So I feel that's covered here by saying that if you're going to go down the route of changing the contact pattern, then you can look at data, you can see what happened in the past, you can calibrate your models and say that lockdown had this much of an impact and so on. What's really
okay. So then if we sorry, yes, it says that.
There are many more things within this that you see, you modify parameters, but it's the problem of introducing averages where maybe averages are not good depending on the model structure. I mean, it makes a big difference if 50% of the population does not infect at all anymore and the other 50 do as before, or if everybody reduces infection by 50%. And that depends on what kind of model you put your behavioral modeling into. If you need just one parameter, if you can have two groups.
Yeah, which I think is what this paragraph is trying to sort of get at, because I think this was your phrase, Jasmina, originally.
Yeah, exactly. But
you're talking about the fact that early on, simple models, and as time goes on, you can look at more complex models.
And just an example there of picking up what you just said, Jampi, is so you say 50% of people are vaccinated, but at the moment, the effect from the vaccination may be different to the 50 to 60-year-olds than it is 60 to 70-year-olds. So you can do this in an age stratified model if you look at 10 age gaps or even one age gap, but still within people of the same age, the host diversity and the viral load may mean that they will have a different effect from the vaccination. This is where individual-based model has the advantages.
Oh yes, but I mean, I would like a summary in the sense, don't put averages in nonlinear processes. But that is slightly too technical, but it contains very much of this, right? You
But
should
then
not
you are sort of
you should not
dismissing.
simplify where you shouldn't simplify.
But with that sentence of dismissing averages, then you are kind of dismissing an SEI model, because however stratified it becomes, it is still based on an average within a population.
Yes, I think SIR models can get things quite wrong if you average the
Well,
wrong
Lorenzo
things.
will disagree.
Yes, maybe. Lorenzo disagree.
Because his model actually fits the epidemic quite well, even though it's quite simple, from what I understand.
Mhm.
Yeah, there is, yes, but the more vaccination you put in, you're right, the more there is a discrepancy between the number of people that get infected and the number of people that end up in hospital. So at the moment,
Yeah.
my model is only parameterized via hospitals. And so over time, I'm expecting the quality of the of the model in order to predict new infections and a reproduction number for infections is going to, it needs a modification. At the moment, there is vaccination coming in, so I'm capturing part of it, but the age structure is important for vaccination. If it's distributed based on age, then age is important. Then how if you only project the model forward by a few weeks and not enough vaccines are distributed within that time frame, and you're already fitting a model to the data you already have, you're already kind of capturing part of it, and the discrepancy within the next 3 weeks, it's not that big. So you can still get away with a simple model, but you are effectively estimating things somewhat wrongly. You're fitting the wrong model and getting wrong.
Yeah, and this was the
That's no
issue
good
I
prediction.
had. If you saw my chat on Wednesday around all the predictions of the roadmap, they were all saying different things, because it's a bit like a stew. When you put different vegetables in, it comes as a different thing.
Yeah, that to me is capturing what's the level of complexity the model needs to have in order to address the question the question asked, really. So the choice of the level of complexity, in the end, all models are wrong. We say it before. Yeah. Right? It depends whether it takes you there. And the question, the choice of the model really depends on the question, because if we want a model that goes up and down, then an SEIR model does pretty well. The question is whether then you have control policies, then what sort of stuff you put in.
I like the idea to coach this in terms of vegetables. I mean, if you want to make a tomato sauce with onion and tomato, the average is peppers, more or less. So you could have all peppers in your sauce instead of onion and tomato. And see if that works. I don't know.
Surely you have to put basil in the tomato.
Yes, Italians would put basil in the tomato, but
let's not go diverge to food.
Let's not get back on food, because I'm hungry already. One thing I would say is that this was focused on non-pharmaceutical interventions. So, although I think the discussion on vaccination was interesting, and probably the same kind of arguments hold anyway in terms of heterogeneity.
I think it really depends when this paper will come, because there is a massive amount of discussion at the moment around vaccination, and quite a lot of that will soon be coming out from different groups, including me. And I think they will have different models, structures, opinions, assumptions, caveats. And it will be kind of important to highlight that even though broadly the results seems to be similar looking ahead, but there are the intrinsic assumptions and caveats really are important. And that is the challenge of modeling real time, which we need to put in here. Yeah. But we don't have any references at the moment. That's the point.
Okay. Maybe we can, we'll come to that maybe if we don't run out of time.
If you just put a placeholder, maybe comment on vaccine, just write comment on vaccination and roadmap, then I'll know what that means.
But we need to try and step back, I think, from some of the detail and think what the main lessons are looking forward. So, you know,
But I think all those kind of issues about, you know, choice of model, choice of question drives the choice of model and model complexity. We do pick up on that in the real-time decision making part later. We don't necessarily, what I'm saying is you don't have to cover all these issues in this section.
And I think the weight of the model. So you've seen that quite a lot of the roadmap work was weighted on the Warwick and Imperial models, but there are other groups that are doing it, and you know they're maybe not so vocal about it, and yet, you know, results are agreement or sometimes disagreement with.
Sorry, Jasmina, you were talking about what? I missed the first part of the sentence.
Oh yeah, so quite a lot of the roadmap planning was advertised as being decisions being made a lot around the Imperial and Warwick modeling, right? But other groups have been doing modeling on that field as well.
Yeah, well, in different parts of the pandemic, definitely. At the moment, I think the main ones are Imperial, Warwick, and London School. But
and I am doing some commissioned elsewhere. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, that's what I could see in SPI-M. But I mean, I did something on schools, which was helpful for deciding when to reopen schools. So in different parts of the pandemic, there have been.
Yeah. And this is also important. So Lorenzo, you know, you and I can write on this part, but I'm not sure yet, because I understand your point, Valerie. Maybe we should write something broad and then extend it later.
I think we need to concentrate on, I mean, we are thinking about future pandemics, and obviously we can use current experience to sort of illustrate points, but wherever possible, we should be trying to think about, you know, the broad modeling messages, rather than things that are, you know, nitty-gritties of roadmaps and things, which are very much here and now and UK.
Yeah, you're right.
But so, I mean, we use these things as examples, and often it's much broader issues. And if we can sort of focus on the broader issues first, it may help.
Apologies, I need to go. I'm happy to continue reading and putting comments. I've already started, but we'll add comments later on. Thank you, guys.
Me too. I also need to go. Are we going till past? Are you planning? Or?
I think so, if there's an appetite for it, but if everyone has to go, we could stop there. I mean,
I can have you on. Okay.
Sorry?
I said I'm happy to go on for another half hour if that's helpful or not.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Okay, I will stay online. I have to speak at the meeting broadly, but I'll keep this meeting on and on mute, and I'll listen and I'll jump in if I have something urgent to say.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jasmine. That's brilliant. I wish I could multitask that well. Okay, so yeah, again, I think what's coming out from here a little bit is that we still haven't quite resolved what the structure of these, because we originally had one sort of mega section and then we tried to split it, and so I think we're still looking for a sensible split, but perhaps this idea of contact structures and then how internal processes affect contacts, or affect the probability of transmission. Maybe that's a way of doing it. I'm not sure.
But one way to get rid of this is, of course, to now again skip the 6.1 and 6.2 structure and just have the small subsections as sections.
Yeah, which is what we originally had.
Yes, we had an introduction and then many small pieces.
Yeah.
If we find it difficult to classify each piece into one or the other, then maybe we shouldn't classify.
Can we I think the way I thought we were trying to do it with this division into 6.1 and 6.2 was that 6.1 was the more generic modeling, which is mainly contact structures, but could add some of the other stuff as well. And then 6.2 was more how that was adapted and used for interventions and made into more, more detailed specific assumptions, which obviously would involve data. So it was the sort of generic distinction between things that were generic and things that were more
yes, but
detailed intervention based.
then it's a question, maybe we're just modifying the titles. Maybe 6.1 should be modeling the spread of the disease, and 6.2 should be modeling interventions against the spread of the disease, or something like that. Because then we can have modeling the spread of the disease contains both the contacts and the infectivity and whatever.
Yeah.
And then,
The thing is, I think there's elements of analysis, or theoretical models in a number of these sections. I'm not sure there's such a clear distinction in my mind, anyway.
but
Particularly when you're talking about challenges, because like I guess historically you can say that the ones at the beginning have had more analytical.
yes, they're more historical. I mean, it starts with the contacts.
But in terms of challenges, we might, maybe it's ambitious, but we might hope that some of these more complex models would be amenable to analysis. And so, yeah.
But Valery's structure can be implemented also without having 6.1 and 6.2, simply by having the order of the subsections in that order. But it would be slightly more flexible. We are not so constrained to say, is this contact or is this something else? I don't know. It's difficult to write papers.
It's clearly difficult because we keep sort of like changing our.
We keep going round in circles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I quite like the idea of the contact process being a sort of organizing thing, because that is so central to all kind of epidemic modeling. But
Yeah, that's fine.
But I mean, what do you then think about this thing about infectivity and transmissibility? Where does it fit?
yeah, that's the thing we need to.
Or should it be a third section then? Which is the contacts, the infectivity, well, and then the intervention.
Yeah, that could work.
With some title, I don't know.
Mhm.
Whatever gets us out of this
Yeah.
distinction problem.
Yeah.
So then we get.
So I have a play around with it and send round some suggestions for.
Yes. Then we get 3 main sections and discussion. So there will be kind of 4 main, 5 main sections.
Yeah.
Intro, 3 sections, discussion.
So in that context, then the immunity and vaccination and the contact tracing would appear as intervention, well, pharmaceutical.
Well, as long as you say interventions, they are intervention stuff when you vaccinate. Of course, you have to do modeling of the immunity that arises from intervention. But that's still because you intervene, so it's probably it fits in the interventions section.
Yeah, although obviously
No, but
immunity is also driven by the.
We still have the problem that we noticed in the beginning, that essentially everything is linked here.
Yeah.
That all these things then have to do with, do we have data on them, or then that's to do with. So everything becomes linked after a while. And we are trying to avoid that in order to speak separately of different things. But now and then we fall back in this problem that things are linked.
Yeah.
But anyway, just to get to the end, what happened then in later sections? There has been work.
Yeah.
Because
so-
Lise has done work and you have done work and Ben has done work, I think. And is that more or less okay? You who have looked especially at the 6.2, has it been compressed and tweaked?
To some extent, but it's not quite. I would say it's not quite ready, but. Okay, so yeah, so Lisa, do you want to talk us through what you did to this section? I have to confess, I've only very quickly read through it, so I haven't.
Yeah. So I moved some of the paragraphs around, tried to draw out some key themes, came to the conclusion that we sort of, first bit is just an introduction, and then we talk about how models can inform data collection, is that second paragraph, and then it goes into a bit more detail about, I guess, optimal data for modeling, or sort of most useful types. And then the final section, if you scroll. So yeah, sorry, the first two bits are, I guess, preparedness, and then this last section is sort of during outbreaks. That's the split I went for. And then there was one paragraph which Glenn, and also I agreed with, felt just very data focused. So I donated it to the data paper. Yeah, and then I just kind of condensed the wording quite a bit as well, because it was a bit long.
No, you do.
I do actually have those references now. Lorenzo gave me some good links, so I can add. I can add in there.
Respond to that, 'cause, yeah, it was Lorenzo that said he had some references.
Yeah, but yeah, I can add that in.
That's great.
I think that's it. Oh, unless we wanted to say something a bit more specific about what data we feel is missing. Because I feel like the text is quite general. We don't give many specific examples.
Okay.
Yeah, the comment there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I thought that. Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one in terms of links to the data paper, but.
But yeah, have a read through it. If people might feel it's okay, or they might think it's a bit vague.
Though, isn't it? Because if we're trying to talk about the future, I mean, the data you need will vary so much.
Yeah.
Depending on what we're talking about. So I don't know how much of it you can put in place in advance.
No, but if we think about data, I mean, in Italy, there's been a lot of discussion because the government very quickly decided here to create a kind of consultant group to the government, and even elected one special modeling group to be the official modelers for the government. And then for a long time kept the results of all this work more or less secret, or very little diffused in media. And so the data streams were not very much discussed, and later on it has been discovered that the data streams are quite uneven because our health organization in Italy is regionalized, and so some regions are good, some are bad. And even now in vaccination, we discovered that some regions vaccinate quickly and others slowly. So Italy has specific problems with data flow in general. There is no unity in collection. There is no single organization responsible for the data, etc. I don't know if Britain probably has a different structure and different problems with the data flow as such, because as Valerie says, depending on the disease, maybe you need different data. But something unifying is who is supposed to collect them, who is responsible to get this data flow quickly.
Yeah.
And,
So I think those kind of issues are definitely things that the data challenges paper is trying to address. Because it talks about ways of doing it, but also the fact that you need institutions to take control of it as well.
And so, yes, so how much we should say here, maybe there will be a data paper. So in that sense, one can refer to it very much for specific problems about getting data. What are our problems with data? We have the statistical problem, but there's an estimation problem. And that's there's an estimation paper, right? So even that aspect is taken care of in another paper. How should we use the data once it is there to calibrate our models or whatever?
I mean, yeah, I think in terms of the modeling, I mean, I was thinking about this when I read it through last night, and I was kind of thinking that in terms of the modeling challenge, the key thing is to develop, I mean, it's maybe not that exciting from a kind of mathematical point of view, but I think that, from a modeling challenge point of view is to develop scenarios which kind of look at different future pandemics and think about, use models to think about how we might tackle them. And so, as I say, it's not necessarily hugely, I mean, there's obviously a lot of work that could be done. And I guess the challenge is to actually figure out which scenarios to look at and how much effort into them.
I think that's what the paragraph starting prior to the next significant Bethany outbreak is trying to get at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms, and that's one of the biggest paragraphs in the section. But I think in terms of the focus for this paper, that's right. And then some of these other things, I guess, really relate to, as Jampi says, relate to estimation or data.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, feel free to take them out if they've been said elsewhere.
Yeah, given the time. So I had to go at rewriting this section. I've kept the initial part, which I liked, but I was struggling with the differentiation between practical and technical, because it seemed to me that lots of the things that under practical were technical and vice versa. So I sort of gave up on that structure. So I've tried to identify the things that I thought were coming out of the text that was there. I don't really think I've added much, but I've tried to reorder it. So the first one is, I think the first challenge for real-time prediction is that basically the question you're asked keeps changing. And so, that's the first thing. And then
No, but you're right that all attempts of classifying things are difficult. So I agree that rereading that sentence, if you take away the three adjectives, practical, technical, and philosophical, then the sentence is perfect anyway.
Yeah.
However, some challenges remain. Because you might also ask yourself, is philosophy practical or abstract? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is technique practical or theoretical?
Yeah.
So if you just take away the three adjectives.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? However, some challenges remain.
Fair enough. Yeah, and then I've sort of classified it, again, it's another classification, but I've classified it as model parameterization and data deficiencies, and then a discussion about model complexity, which relates to what Jasmina and Lorenzo were talking about just now, and maybe I can try and modify that in light of that discussion. And then
I will read through. I'm here, I'm listening. I will read through.
Okay, great.
What you put.
And then there's uncertainty was another thing that was mentioned, but because that's covered in the estimation chapter, I've really tried to cut this bit back, largely with references to chapter 7 and some of the papers that Veronica Bowman and Seb Funk, and I think there's some others that I had in mind for that. And then the section I've not really changed yet is the philosophy, because there was a bit of discussion about whether we needed it here or whether it should go in the introduction. And this is all about, things like, I mean, it's possible that this could go at the start of this section as well, in terms of what you're trying to do when you're doing real-time prediction, and that's around things like using projection versus prediction and scenarios to think about what might happen. So
I think there's quite a lot of link with estimation here as well. I guess prediction kind of comes a lot under estimation, and I've already written a bit about this in the estimation paper. Obviously, scenario prediction is slightly different to estimation, so there is some link here, but I think in terms of prediction, it's much more naturally in estimation.
Yeah. So possibly a lot of that could go. So I wonder whether we need that much of that section, but some of the ideas could be put elsewhere. And then Ben, do you want to just quickly talk through what you did with 6.5?
Yeah, sure. I didn't do a huge amount. Some of it was just reducing. There was a couple of sentences that really repeated the same thing, so I removed a couple of those or combined them together in the first section. There was a very small section right at the end, which seemed to be a mixture of expert elicitation and prediction and some other things which were mentioned elsewhere. So I just moved the expert elicitation bit into the expert elicitation section that was already there, and the other bits I put into the first paragraph because I think they naturally worked quite well there.
So one
small changes, but other than that, there wasn't a great deal I don't think we needed doing.
One thing we do need to do in terms of this expert elicitation is just check that, because I noticed that this stuff is still in the chapter 7, so we kind of just need to decide which one it's going to go in, and if it's not going to be here, we can just take it out, I guess.
Yeah, there's some specific aspects which relate to modelling, but I think a lot of it will match with 7.5. And there's also just a comment there on your screen at the moment. There's a mention of visualization. I think there's now going to be a visualization challenges paper. So either that needs to be referenced here instead of chapter 8, or once that paper's written, we need to check that it's not just reiterating what's in there.
Yeah. I mean, it's fairly brief what's stated here, I think, on visual.
Yeah, it is. So it shouldn't be too much, and we probably won't know what's in that paper until after we've this one. So yeah, but other than that, there wasn't a great deal that needed doing, I don't think, on this section.
Okay. Great.
So what's the task for next Friday?
Next Friday is a bank holiday.
That's a good answer. That's a very good answer.
I won't be here. You guys can come.
You're right.
So I'm just trying to see what the date is of the following Friday.
Yeah, that's Easter, right? Easter period.
Next Friday is Easter, yeah. Friday is the 2nd, I think, so the following one would be the 9th.
So do we want to meet on the 9th then?
That's the next Friday, or
yeah, that's just so we missed one Friday.
Yeah, okay.
So if that's the case, then maybe
we meet again on Friday night.
If that's the case, maybe the best thing for me to do is for us to do on this, and I'm happy for other people to suggest otherwise, is for me to compile a version. Then maybe by email this week we can sort of try and decide what structure it should have, and then that would give us like a week to 10 days for everyone to read through it, the whole thing, and by the 9th.
Yeah, do you want to,
or is that
would it be helpful? I don't know whether you can, but if you could suggest a structure based on the
Yeah, no, I was going
our
to
discussions, because otherwise we if we just
no, exactly. I was going to try and I would mull it over, and I'll come up with what I think is the solution, and then or maybe two solutions, and then send that round and see what people think.
and then maybe allocate, as we did before, allocate specific parts to specific subgroups of people to try and, if there's further work needed. I mean, we can all read, of course,
Yeah.
but then perhaps to resolve remaining issues,
Yeah.
allocate to groups.
So is this going to be, are you going to do it as a whole paper?
I think we're at that point again now where it makes
Yeah,
sense.
I mean, I think it would probably be easiest to have a whole paper. It can maybe come with some notes, perhaps, from yourself, and including notes from other people, which suggest things like, such and such it's been suggested such and such a bit should be moved from 6.2 to 6.3, or whatever it might be. So you might have some notes as to, but as Valerie says, also ask specific groups of 2 or 3 people to look at parts. I mean, or maybe we should just be you can ask for volunteers if you are not sure.
Yeah.
And then if people are working on it, again, depends how much changes people want to make. They can make a new version of the whole thing, or they can make a new version of parts of it, as long as they explain what they're doing.
Should we also send it to Hans at this stage?
Well, yes, soon. The question is, I suppose, how much more we try to do first.
Maybe if you create a new version, Glenn, you could put it as a question. Or is this
something?
Is this ready to send to Hans?
Okay.
And
yeah.
I mean, you can always send it to Hans with a question or two, as long as you don't make it too difficult for him.
Yeah.
You could have a general question of we're not quite sure we've structured it right. So your views on the ordering and structure will be very welcome, or something like that. But depends.
No, but maybe we need one more round so that we have decided the structure and even written a kind of 2 words of discussion.
Yeah.
Then I mean, references and stuff we can put in afterwards, I guess, for Hans. But it would be nice if he saw a more or less complete art paper and then say.
Yeah. Because I think it's our job to come up with the structure, or at least what we think the structure should be, and then he can suggest changes. But I sort of feel, we're abdicating our responsibility.
Yeah. Okay, and as we go along in this, we should maybe be trying to check out references if we can.
Yeah.
Yes, fill in some, but we have many references now in notes, or we know them but haven't written them in, etc.
Yeah, I mean, some of them in sort of marginal notes, it seems. I mean, they should be.
Yeah, I will try and in the next version I'll put I'll try and
tidy them up a bit.
Yeah,
be good.
Yeah, we have largely done that, but I noticed there are a few places where it's still.
I think 1 or 2 of mine are just name and dates, but not the details. So I need to go through and put those somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know quite where you want them though, whether you wanted them in marginal, in comments, or down at the bottom in a section or whatever. So.
I don't mind it just having so sometimes it says it's a bit cryptic because it says, I don't know, it gives some names and a date, and it's not always easy to figure out what.
Yeah. No, I can.
No, but introduce a reference section at the end of the paper. We can start writing in.
Yeah, no, there is
things,
one. There's a separate section which is the references. So we
Okay.
do have like 20 plus references, I think.
Hmm.
It's just that a few of them are still haven't been.
And then in the paper, we used the style with name and authors and year, more or less. We have decided for the moment.
I haven't actually checked what Epidemics does, but I think it's.
I think they're happy with name and date. It's the style we used before. So.
It's
In the
three,
text,
three,
okay.
three authors, up to 3 authors, and then.
Et al. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so from now on, we try to write our references down in the reference list and we use them with name and date in the text.
Yeah. Well, I guess if we're all reading through, we can, as we read, if there's anything that we put in that isn't full, we can just add it at that point. So it should be fairly easy to do that.
Great.
Glenn, do you feel comfortable with doing all this? Because it's, so you have to decide now which of the structures you like.
Yeah.
And then how to apportion work to people.
Power.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm based on the discussion today. I'm happy to have another go at trying to come up with a structure, maybe with a new section. We'll see what we think.
Okay.
Good.
So.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Coffee time.
Thank you very much. Have a good lunch and meet you in 2 weeks. Then happy Easter.
Yeah. Okay. Enjoy the pasta.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll tell you next time about the recipe of pasta with chickpeas.
We'll send it round.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, all of you. Bye.